Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our third webinar of our WIM series. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Rachel Daniels, and her presentation is going to be right on time because I think we all have been dealing with different things in our lives. COVID. Last week, we had the storm, which caused us to have to postpone this particular webinar series. And it is my hope that everyone is doing well in these times. So without further ado, I will introduce Miss Rachel Daniels. Rachel, take it over.
Hello, can everyone hear me? There we go. Oh, there we go. There we go. Now I'm getting some feedback. Well, welcome. My name is Rachel Daniels, and I am thrilled to be here with you today. I am a licensed certified social worker. I've been practicing social work for over 18 years now and have worked in many different settings with children, with parents, with vulnerable adults, with caregivers, with trauma survivors in the court systems, and teaching as well. And so this topic that we will be discussing today is particularly important to me personally and professionally, because when we consider the importance of resiliency and how we can get through and weather the storms of life, that is a skill that can carry us through our home lives, our personal lives, and our work environments, and our communities and beyond. And so I'm excited to be able to spend just a little bit of time with you today, hoping that it will be a refreshing moment for you to be able to take a break, to breathe for a moment, to assess where you are, and to re-engage in a commitment to doing what you need to take care of yourself in this moment. So I am challenged with not being able to see the chat. I want to make sure that everyone can still hear and see me okay. Can I get a response?
We can hear you.
Perfect, perfect. That's all I needed. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. I do have a PowerPoint for y'all today. Just a second to get this pulled up for you. There we are. Okay. So just a quick disclaimer. This presentation is over the lunch break, so it is brief. It is not exhaustive and does not include everything that we can discuss about resiliency and wellness. I do want to make sure that we will have some time to have questions answered that you may have, but also give you just a brief little small bit of information about this topic so that you can carry on into a bigger discussion later on if you're interested. I don't have any conflicts of interest that I need to disclose. And it's important for me to honor and recognize that I've been able to be a part of many different resiliency training certifications in my career. And some of the material that I use today comes from that education that I have received. And then I want to offer a content warning. Although I have been extra careful in considering the information that I am providing today, this is a very challenging time. And so we will discuss briefly COVID, trauma, stress, and if you feel that you are impacted by any of this information, I do hope that you feel comfortable taking care of yourself and doing what you need in the moment. There will not be any videos or graphic details discussed though. So here are our objectives. We're going to talk about resiliency, defining it. We're going to discuss the impact of this moment and time that we're all sharing, our environments, whether it's your home environment, your community environment, or your work environment. The unique needs of women in this moment. What are the normal responses that we can expect from stress and the stressful events that we're experiencing? We'll explore some coping skills and tools, empower you to not only think about and prioritize self-care for yourself individually, but also how you can be a part of community self-care beyond just yourself. And we're going to create an individual action plan at the end of this. So as we're going through these slides, I'm going to allow you the opportunity to assess where you are and think about what is something that I want to take from the discussion today into ways that I can fill my cup up, fill myself up so that I can continue doing the very best work that I can. And then I have some resources that I want to share with you. So here's where I want to start. I have to be completely honest with you. I do have a few intentions for today. One is that I want this to be a safe space for everyone. I want you to feel like you belong here. I want you to feel like you're being heard here, that you're being seen here, that there is no judgment assigned to your feelings, the way that you are processing things, and that you feel like you can be authentic and vulnerable if needed. Okay. This will require us to be intentional about how we engage with each other in this space, how we are supportive of one another and allow each other in this virtual world that we're living in to be connected with each other. So we are perfectly imperfect. Sometimes we're chasing perfection. Sometimes we're chasing it being just right. But in no way can we ever be everything to everybody at every single moment. And so it's okay for us to be imperfect. And what I also want to do is allow you to give yourself permission, if you can, to give yourself a break just in this moment. Over the next hour that we have together, to consider putting aside the multiple things that you have to do, as we're always on the go. We always have a long to-do list. We're often multitasking at the same time. That you can give yourself just a few minutes just to put it all down, just to sit in this moment, to plant your feet on the floor, to allow yourself to get connected to the ground, and to breathe in the experience that we have here together. All right, so we're talking about resiliency. And there are a number of ways that we can look at resiliency. We can look at it from the perspective of psychological resiliency, emotional resilience, physical resilience, social resilience, community resilience. And when we're thinking about resilience, you know, it's a word that we're hearing a lot right now in the media, in our social circles, in our work environments. So in the chats, I invite you to tell the group, what do you think resiliency is? When you hear that word, what does it mean to you? I'll give you a few minutes just to think through that. For some people, resilience means the ability to bounce back from adversity, right? You look at the graphics here and you see we have flowers that are growing out of concrete. Or you see that we have trees that are weathering a storm. Okay. We can think about resiliency when we think about events. So short-term resilience right in the moment, or long-term resilience over a period of time. And it's really important for us to remember that being resilient does not mean that individuals are free from problems or difficulties. Resilience can be a very ugly thing at some moments. It may not be pretty all the time. But if we can recognize the signs and symptoms of stress or trauma, or recognize how it's impacting us, then we can create a plan, engage tools and skills to manage that so that we can have resiliency in our personal and professional lives. Building resiliency is something that we can do each and every day. It's not something that we're born with or that we either have or we don't have. We can actually spend some time to learn about it and develop it in ourselves.
Rachel, we have some comments in the chat box of people who wanted to define resiliency. So you might want to check there and read them to the group.
All right, let me see what we have. Overcoming, big or small. Sometimes an onslaught of small things can be more difficult than one huge thing, from Natasha. The ability to get through it somehow. Yes. Yes. Let's see what else we have. A strong comeback. Break into pieces, but put yourself together. Yeah. Those are all excellent. We're going to talk more about it here today. So what I'd like to engage us to do as a group is to collectively take a breath. We have been going and going and going over the last 12 months and sometimes beyond that without the ability to just take a break and have a breath. So I want to encourage you to take a moment just to put everything down, everything out of your hands, free from your phone, free from that to-do list. And just for a few seconds, we're going to all take a few breaths together. What I want us to do is take a breath in through our nose for 4 seconds. I want us to hold it for 4 seconds. And then I want us to take a big breath out through our mouths for 7 seconds. And let's do that together. Big breath in through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold it for 4 seconds. And big breath out for 7 seconds. Good breath in for 4 seconds. Hold it for 4 seconds. And a big breath out for 7 seconds. One more big breath in for 4 seconds. Last hold for 4 seconds. And the last big release out for 7 seconds. Collectively, we can catch our breath. Thank y'all for participating in that. Okay, let's see. So I want to ask you a question. And you can be as honest as you feel comfortable being. How are you doing? You know, we have this kind of standard response when someone asks us, how are we doing? Okay, right? But how are you really doing in this moment? knowing without judgment, without shame, that it's okay if we're not okay. You can ask yourself some questions to take stock about where you are, right? There's so much uncertainty right now still. We've got COVID-19, we've got economic issues, we've got teaching at home, we've got concerns about our health, concerns about our family and our loved ones. We've got issues with social injustice. We have concerns about our neighbors, our senior population, our vulnerable population. So we have a lot that we've been carrying for a while now. And just take stock right now of how you are. We've had to do several times over the course of this last year, redefining what is normal for us. You think about when we started 2020, and then we got through spring break, and then we got through the summer, and then the holidays and into 2021. Each transition required us to create a new normal for ourselves and our loved ones. So where's your tank at? Are we running on empty? Are we full? Have you considered that message that we hear on the airplane about making sure that we put on our mask first before we put on the mask of others? And what are you all thinking? You can put this in the chat. When you see this graphic about a cup overflowing, what do you feel is your responsibility about giving to others? Do you feel like you're supposed to give out of your cup until it's depleted, until it's empty? Do you have an ideal about, giving the overflow out of your cup, the things that are flowing over? What is your sense about what are you required? What are you responsible? What should, that should word, you give to other people in this moment? Give until you can't give anymore, April. What else? The more you give, the more you receive. Yeah. Give self first, and what is left over, give. Yeah. If you have it to give it from the heart. Those are all great. So we'll talk some later on about self-care and our thoughts about self-care. What do we believe what is our belief about our responsibility to giving to ourselves and how that impacts how we give to other people? Okay, so we're going to start with the social determinants of health. The social determinants of health are conditions in the places where people live, learn, work, and play that affect a wide range of health risks and outcomes. These are conditions in the environment in which people are born, they live, they work, they play, they worship, and age that affect a wide range of health, functioning, and the quality of life outcomes and risks. In the chat, I would like you to tell me, what do you see as the difference between mental health and mental illness? How would you define those differences? When you think about your mental health versus a mental illness. All right, I don't see anything coming through yet. So mental health, it includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Mental health is pretty important. The difference in mental illness is that a mental illness is a health condition involving changes in emotion, thinking, or behavior, or a combination of these. And mental illnesses are associated with distress and are problems functioning in social, work, and family activities. So in any given year, we know that nearly 1 in 5 US adults experience some form of mental illness. And 1 in 24 have a serious mental illness. We know that 1 in 12 have a diagnosable substance use disorder. And we know that mental illness is treatable. Okay? With the psychological crisis that's happening because of the pandemic and other stressors that are happening in this time, mental health providers are expecting a quote unquote tsunami of mental health concerns, mental illnesses, because of the stress that many of our neighbors are experiencing. Okay, so in all of that, when we think about where we are in this moment, what do you think are the unique needs of women today? Professional women. What are unique needs occurring for women in this moment? And I'd like you to add that in the chat. What do you think those are? Love, family, and health, time to rest, support, time for self. Yeah. Caring for family, working, time for self. That's right. You know, when you think about the many roles that women have, the many hats that women are wearing, you're talking about just individually their needs, but then their responsibilities as far as work, relationships, marriage, parenting, caregiving, relationships with their friends, with neighbors, responsibilities in the community. And you're balancing all of that while engaging with the stress of what's happening in the world. So virtual learning. You may be a mother who is teaching from home while their child is also learning from home at the same time. We know that 90% of single families are headed by women. So single mothers being responsible for the care of their children, their families, as well as managing the stress of the day. So we can have stress from work, from home, in our communities. We've had an ice storm that we've had to deal with in many areas of the state. We're dealing with vaccines getting allocated out. Lots of media is happening right now. Women are dealing with issues related to motherhood, pregnancy, what to do when you feel burned out. Yes, we're going to talk about burnout. Those are all great. So when we think about the needs that are specific to women, we want to recognize some risk factors. Some risk factors to cue us to, okay, this is a normal reaction, or I'm at high risk, and so maybe I need to pay more attention to the symptoms that I'm experiencing and seek out for help. So what are some risks that you think put us at a higher level of concern for distress, for challenges with our functioning, or any other symptoms that we may experience? Add those to the chat for me. What are some risk factors? Thinking we can do everything without help. That should be number one for some of us. Yeah. What else? Lack of sleep. Yes. Not getting enough sleep, not eating properly, always focusing on others at the detriment of our own health. Yes. So when we're thinking about risk factors, we can break those up into different categories: work-related risk factors, personal risk factors, and community risk factors. And some work-related risk factors could be job insecurity, if we're concerned about our jobs, if we work really long hours, if we have high-touch professions that require us to have a lot of compassion and a lot of empathy, if our jobs are very intense and there's a lot of pressure, if we're responsible for delivering bad news, if we have very high caseloads, very high responsibilities, if we see intrusive images, those triggering images, if we're in an unsympathetic, unsupportive environment, if we have poor coping skills, if we have a lack of self-compassion towards ourselves, if we're sleep deprived, if we are not physical, not exercising, not moving around, if we have poor nutrition, those are all some risk factors, some examples of some risk factors that can cause us to get into some trouble. So when would you seek help then? What do you think is the threshold to say, you know what, I think I may need to reach out to someone to get some support? Add that to the chat for the group. Harming yourself. Yes. Starts impacting, affecting interactions with family. Yes. We think we would be able to determine when, but many do not want to admit it. That is a hard question. I agree. Sometimes we feel if we ask for help, we have failed. I think we as women need to seek help yearly like we do our annuals. Amazing. Amazing. Isolating yourself. Yeah. So, some considerations, and you can think about this for yourself, but also for the people that are around you, because we need to be paying attention to our loved ones, the people that we work with, the people that we care about, because we are all collectively experiencing a lot of stress right now. If we have chronic and persistent fears and anxieties that impair critical life areas like our job, our family, our social circle, interpersonally and recreationally, if we have behaviors that pose a risk of harm to ourselves or others, if we have difficulty functioning, poorly adjusting to the stress that's happening right now, perceiving that there are dangers everywhere, those are some moments when we may need to say, we may need to reach out for help. So let's talk about stress then. Stress is our body's response to the demands that are made on it. Okay. It is known, and unfortunately, it's an accepted feature of modern life that we just expect that we should live a life that's filled with stress. And it's widely acknowledged that stress is very common and can have a very high cost to it. Okay. Stress can cause acute and chronic changes, which can provoke long-term damage to systems and organs, particularly if our body is unable to rest and recover. Let me say that one more time. Stress can cause acute and chronic changes that provoke long-term damage to systems and organs, particularly if our body is unable to rest and recover. Okay. When we think about stress, many people, their immediate response to it is to numb their reaction to it or try to escape it. Okay? And that can be problematic. Instead of us looking in and leaning into what is happening within our body so that we can pay attention to what is the need that I have right now. If our heart rate is increasing, if our respiration is increasing, those are signs that our body is trying to tell us there is a need here, okay? Sometimes that need may be, I need help, I need connection, I need resources, I need support, I need affirmation, right? But it's important for us to learn how to pay attention to it. Now, trauma. Trauma is the result from an event, series of events, or a set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning, their mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. There are some studies out that particularly the adverse childhood experiences study that looks at the experiences of children and how that impacts adults later on in their lives. And that 67% of those studied in that childhood study as an adult had experienced some form of trauma throughout their lives. And so trauma is everywhere. And if we think about it, we have either experienced watching someone experiencing trauma or been a victim and surviving trauma ourselves. There's generational, historical trauma, and there's work-related trauma that we can experience. So it is repeated adverse experiences that can cause our systems to be activated over and over again. That's problematic. This can cause some damage to our systems. And we're going to talk about vicarious trauma, particularly in a minute, because just because you have not experienced the trauma yourself does not mean that you may not be impacted by it, especially if it's happening to someone that you hear about, that you love, that you're close to. And the brain. We can't talk about any of this without considering neurobiology, which is concerned with uncovering the biological mechanisms by which the nervous systems mediate behavior, right? So we are wired to survive. As early as the first humans that landed, we needed to survive, right? So our body internally has a system that helps us to fight, to flight, and to freeze. It's important for us to recognize this about ourselves, because if that system is activated over and over and over again, it can cause some long-term effects, some long-term damage. Especially if we remember what I said earlier, if our body is not given the opportunity to rest and recover. If we are always activated, if we are always in high alert without that ability to rest and recover, it can cause some serious consequences. So let's dig in deep. Okay, so I want to start with burnout. In the chat, tell me what you think burnout really means. What is burnout? Need a nap, exhaustion, overwhelmed, disconnect, lack of energy, uncontrollable, tired. Yeah. Feeling you can't take anything else, can't focus, reaction to prolonged or chronic job stress. Throughout this last year, I can almost predict that at some point, every single person has experienced some level of burnout, whether it's burnout with virtual conferences, burnout with Zoom meetings, burnout with wearing masks, burnout with work-related burnout, burnout with caregiving, parenting, right? So burnout can occur in any profession and anyone can experience it. It is the result of general occupational stress. It generally occurs as a result of administrative pressures like pressure from your supervisor, deadlines, feeling overworked and underpaid, unmanageable workloads, trying to give what you just don't have, no balance between work and home, no recognition, no support, no autonomy. So some signs of burnout can be absenteeism from work, not showing up for work, coming in late, leaving early, avoiding different tasks, going through the motions, talking negatively about people that you are around, never taking vacation time, coming in sick instead of taking a sick day, being surgically attached to your phone, no separation between personal or professional life, right? And what can this look like? This can look like cynicism. It can look like negative self-esteem, a poor attitude, emotional exhaustion, reduced feelings of personal accomplishment, increased sense of hopelessness. Believe that our efforts are useless. There can be anger, frustration, sadness, emotional and physical fatigue. Okay. So from burnout, we can talk about empathy and compassion fatigue. What is empathy and compassion fatigue? Share in the chat what you think those terms mean. Lack of understanding, I wish Zoom would create this feature where you could see the faces of the people that are chatting with you. Your sense of empathy and compassion is replaced by numbness. Yeah. Lack of feelings toward any given situation. Yeah. So it is a set of negative consequences experienced by helpers. It is essentially caring so much for so long that you just can't care anymore. You get sick and tired of caring about the sick and tired. You run out of compassion. And over time, it's a gradual erosion of all things that keep us connected to others. The importance of compassion and empathy. So what does this look like? It can look like a decrease in the quality of our work or our interactions. It can look like errors that we make. It can look like increased rates of stress in the household, divorce, social isolation. And the most insidious aspect of compassion fatigue is that it attacks the very core of what brings us as helpers into the work that we do or the interactions that we have. And that's the empathy and compassion that we have for other people. So this can look like tiredness, apathy, headaches, insomnia, gastrointestinal distress. Those are great responses. All right, so let's go to the next one. Now we're talking about vicarious trauma. So vicarious trauma is caused by the indirect exposure to trauma. Some of us may believe that if hearing these stories and dealing with other people's trauma, that if it impacts us, that we are quote unquote weak. Okay. Some of us may have thought or even said to others, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing if you can't handle it. Some of us are affected by the work that we do or the stories that we hear, but we end up shoving it down because we think to ourselves, this didn't happen to me. I don't deserve to feel this way. We act like we're okay when we're really not. So the definition of vicarious trauma is that it is a change in the frame of reference related to trust, control, safety, intimacy, or esteem. It is the cumulative exposure to another person's traumatic material. So what happens is this change in reference that we have ends up minimizing a person's experiences and robs us the ability to give them compassionate interactions. We end up invalidating their feelings. We negate the suffering that they're experiencing, and we fail to see the gravity and importance of all of the suffering and pain that's happening around us. So some signs of vicarious trauma are a loss of confidence that good is still possible in the world, a disconnection from loved ones, social withdrawal, changes in identity, our spirituality, or our worldview. Insignificant daily experiences are experienced as threatening. We feel disillusioned, and we have a generalized feeling of despair and hopelessness. And then we have secondary traumatic stress. Secondary traumatic stress is when individuals become traumatized, not by directly experiencing a traumatic event, but by hearing about traumatic events happening to other people. Repeated exposure to adverse details or knowledge about the trauma that's experienced to someone else. Some of us are in professions or around professions or have loved ones that are in professions where they are in direct contact with those who have experienced trauma. And secondary traumatic stress can lead to a diagnosis of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So some of the ways that this can look is that you can have intrusive thoughts, re-experiencing the images. You can have avoidance, avoiding thoughts, feelings, people, or situations. You can have negative alterations to moods or thoughts, depression. You can have increased arousal, where you can't go to sleep at night, or you're very irritable, have difficulty concentrating, easily startled. And then we want to consider adjustments, anxiety, mood. We want to think about grief and loss, eating disorders, sleep disorders, substance use disorders, and suicidal ideation as a part of this as well. So what's the cost? The cost can be looked at psychologically, socially, economically, and spiritually. The cost can include greater use of sick time, absenteeism, high turnover rates, low morale or productivity, negative attitudes, increased errors, or lower satisfaction by those that we are involved with. So knowing all of this, knowing the impact of stress, the impact of trauma, the impact of experiencing some of these things versus witnessing others experience these. What do you think, and I want you to add this in the chat, what do you think are some of the barriers, the obstacles, or the blocks that cause us not to focus on preventing some of this from happening or intervening really early when trouble is occurring? What are some of the barriers or blocks? Y'all there? Give y'all a second to think about it. There we go. Any thoughts? There we go. Thought they were coming in. Okay, so some of the blocks or barriers can be, we are in a very busy culture. We don't put this as a focus. We don't prioritize ourselves. We prioritize other things. We have a lot of judgment and shame and fears about asking for help when it's needed. And then there are some systemic blocks. All right, so let's then talk about what can we do. So in order to cope with challenges and stress, we need to work on building our resilience. And there are 5 areas that are offered by a training that was created by the Children's Advocacy Centers in Michigan with support from the Office of Victims of Crime, that gave us 5 core elements to considering resiliency. And the first one is personal perspective and meaning. This can be the most important source of resiliency. It is the way you see life and participate in it. It's our ability to be flexible in the ways that we see ourselves and understand the world. It's our understanding of our own personal values, our personal why, that life is bigger than us. And then there is a sense of hope. This is our ability to hold on to the bright things in life, to celebrate victories, to have a sense of humor, to have the ability to have fun, and to have realistic optimism. We have healthy coping. Healthy coping acknowledges that there is always stress in our lives, unfortunately. It's unavoidable, but there are ways to take care of ourselves to combat the stresses in our work and personal lives. We can look at our emotions. Are they positive? Our sleep patterns, our physical fitness, our nutrition, how we regulate ourselves. We can look at acknowledging the impacts of what's happening around us, being able to sense the impact and being really intentional in our practice on doing something about it. Then there's self-knowledge and insight. This is our ability to pay attention to what is going on internally inside of us. Why are we behaving the way we're behaving? Why are we having the thoughts and the feelings that we're having? What do they mean? So this leads to self-awareness. It also leads to a healthy locus of control, which is our ability to strike a balance between knowing what we can control and what we cannot control. And then support. This is the biggest one for me. Strong relationships. And these are our ability to connect with others and build mutual care and support. Our relationships with our family and friends are important, obviously, but also our relationships with our coworkers and our neighbors and the community at large. And our relationship to ourselves is incredibly important. Do we have people in our lives, or are you a person who sees someone off balance and can approach them supportively? Do we give support? Can we seek support? And can we communicate what our needs are? When we're looking at resilience, we want to think about caregiving resilience, and we also want to think about organizational and community resilience beyond just the resilience of ourselves. So self-care. When we were talking about the cup overflowing earlier, I want you to keep that image in your mind as we consider that self-care can be the best act of unconditional self-love that we can provide to ourselves. It is more about what we do for ourselves, how we think about ourselves, and how we treat ourselves. And think about this, when you are at your best, when your needs are met as best that they can be, everyone around you benefits because of it. Okay. So our self-care needs have to be prioritized. We have to put our own oxygen mask on. And we have to constantly make sure that our cup is being filled so that then we can share the overflow with other people. If our cup is depleted, if we are low on our cup, how can we give anything to anyone else? So this self-care wheel gives you lots of ideas about ways that you can provide self-care for yourself, whether it's personal, professional, physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual. And then this is a hierarchy of self-care needs, with basic needs being sleep, eating, hydration, personal safety, access to resources, and hygiene. So beyond just our own individual self-care, we want to lean into community self-care. How are we engaging in efforts to build resilience for our community as a whole? So I have an activity for us, because I don't want you to just leave here the way that you came, thinking about what we've talked about in our time together. I want you to spend some time considering these questions. Okay. So what makes you feel like oh, that's a typo. that your head is in the right place, that you are centered and balanced and aligned. What helps you feel that sense of balance? Okay. And then what makes you feel meaning? What makes you feel hopeful, inspires you? What makes you feel like you can handle what the day has thrown at you and released the stress that you've experienced? And then what makes you feel supported, connected, that you belong, and that you are a part of a team? Well, let's see what we're sharing. Yoga helps me. Being able to spend quality time with my kids, good conversations with them at the dinner table at the end of the day. And on Fridays when we share what we are grateful for the week. Yes. Yes. Faith. Yes, connection to a higher power. Working out, making me feel hopeful and know that I have to keep going. It's my daughters. Yes. Reading. Yes. So in thinking about what you've shared, what is this something that you want to make sure that you create some intentional focus towards to help pour into your cup? You want to make sure that you check in about your faith. Make sure you have some time on your calendar for reading. Making sure you schedule that exercise time because you know that it really makes you feel better when you do. Okay. All right. And then I am biased about counseling as a clinician and spend all of my efforts every time I can, every chance that I can to try to destigmatize mental health services, to explain and share that therapy does work, that it is a safe place for many people. And so if you need to reach out for support, know that there are providers all over, particularly providers that are able to provide telehealth services safely from the comfort of your homes right now, if you or someone you know needs to receive the support during this crisis moment that we're in. Here are a list of some important contact numbers that I wanted to share and allow you to have, whether it's the National Alliance of Mental Illness, crisis response teams through the Mississippi Department of Mental Health, the suicide prevention hotline, eating disorder, self-injury, grief recovery, veterans crisis, domestic violence, the National Parent Helpline. Here are a number of resources that I wanted to share with you. And then I want to end with this quote. We have survived as a species for over 100,000 years. What's amazing to me as an archaeologist is the more and more I study, the more I realize we are resilient, we are creative, we are brilliant, and this is what makes us humans. And that has not changed since we've been humans. Thank y'all so much for your time today, and I am open to answer any questions that you may have.
Rachel, we had one that appeared in the chat box. You kind of already answered it a little bit, but I just want you to focus on it. It says, explain the misconception of seeking therapy. Many people think that they shouldn't because they feel it's only for the mentally ill.
Such a great question. Think about therapy, and I think about therapy in the same way that I think about going to my medical doctor each year, in the same way that I think about going to my dentist every 6 months, my eye doctor every year. Just like those organs are important, those systems in our body are important. Our emotional, our psychological system is just as important. And so, yes, those with severe mental illness do seek out counseling and receive services, but anyone can receive quality mental health services because of challenges or transitions that we have in life that we need support and help with, to help us challenge our thinking and consider maybe some patterns that exist that aren't helpful to us, to help us to explore our reactions or our responses that are impacting our functioning, our ability to have meaningful relationships with other people. And just an overall sense of, checking in on our self-confidence, our self-esteem, and checking in on core beliefs that we may have, or areas where we may feel like we're not good enough, and where that comes from. A therapist can be a safe place, a non-biased, non-judgmental listening ear that can just give us some support as we navigate questions we may have about ourselves.
Okay, we got one last question. What are ways to encourage young people to seek therapy or counseling from a professional?
Hmm. I think we can start as adults in how we talk about it to our children, and how they see us engaging with mental health services. I would encourage, just like we share that it's a safe place for adults, it's a safe place for children as well, to have a space just of their own to be able to go to confidentially and talk to someone, and help them process experiences that they've had in life, to process feelings and thoughts and beliefs, and come up with resources that they can be connected with to get them to their best selves.